Welcome back to Spilling the Teeth. I'm Dr. Ryan Hungate, Chief Strategy and Clinical Officer for Henry Schein One. Today's conversation is one I've been wanting to have for a while. My guest leads the trade association that represents the largest DSOs in the industry, the people who advocate, defend, and define what dental support organizations look like in the United States. Andrew Smith is the president and CEO of the Association of Dental Support Organizations, the ADSO. Andrew, thanks for making the time today, man.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm excited for our conversation.
Awesome. So the reason I called this one policy versus progress is because I think those two forces are really pulling DSOs in real time. Like the headwinds, interest rates, reimbursement, labor, like have made everyone question whether the model still works. But
Yep.
the operators I talk to are sharper than they've ever been. So I want to spend the next 30 minutes pressure testing what's actually true and where this next chapter of growth comes from. So if you're cool with that, let's get into it.
Absolutely.
Awesome. So let's start at the 30,000 foot level here. There's a real narrative right now that DSOs are entering a slowdown. Valuations are compressed, M&A is cooled, debt is more expensive than it's been in 20 years. And the consolidation thesis sounds tired to, I think, a few different people out there. From where you sit at the ADSO, you're talking to hundreds of operators every single month. I want your honest read. Is this a slowdown or is this a transition into a different kind of growth era?
Yeah, no, great question. And I've seen, quite a bit of what I like to call the noise, in the industry. I think it's definitely the latter that you mentioned, we're more in a transitional phase. And I like to tell folks, certainly before my time at ADSO, which has been 5 years, there's been a lot of cyclical changes with this industry. And I think we're entering one of those new cyclical changes as we speak.
Where do you think the disconnect comes between like that sentiment and what's actually happening inside like your member organization, which it sounds like every event I go to, people are pumped.
I think, over the last several years, part of that thinking has come through just the nature of these types of deals that have been occurring within the DSO space. Certainly pre-COVID, there was a lot of what we like to call EBITDA stacking. Probably wasn't great for the industry where people were going out and aggregating a ton of practices, not really looking at like the operational efficiencies, right? And so coming out of COVID, a lot of cash out there, very cheap. And so people did a lot of deals. And I think, people kind of just started to assume, oh, multiples would be at that 14x to 18x. And, we're just kind of going to go on rocket fuel like that. And that's a not realistic of how industries continue to grow and change. And I think, we're in this new period of, I think a lot of people have talked about, same store sales, operational efficiencies, deploying different types of technologies to make people more efficient. So I think it's just more of a new cycle of where we are and kind of where the industry's going. I mean, at the end of the day, in free capitalist markets, the market will bear out winners and losers. And I think the market is continuing to reward those that have delving deeper and deeper into the operational efficiencies and, potential consolidation, which I use in a good way. And I'm sure we can delve into a little more specifics, but that's how I'm kind of, seeing things and why I think people are probably like, oh, well, why isn't it like 2021? Well, it's a different environment and they're different size and shapes. And the final thing I'll say on this is when I joined ADSO, I remember folks talking about, those DSOs that were north of 100 million in revenue, and it was only probably like 15. And, now I'd say
Oh yeah.
it's a lot more, and there are a lot more DSOs that have, 50 to 150 offices. And so I
So
think,
many.
yeah, trying to figure out, kind of next steps of how to get those continuing to grow is probably where we are.
I'm always so surprised at meeting another 50 location practice that I've never heard of. Which you would think at Henry Schein One, we've like at least met or mapped all of them. We're always like, who
Right.
the heck is this one? And then it's like just these surprise 50 lokes. Like, so if 2018 then was like, let's say peak optimism and 2023 was peak skepticism,
Mhm.
right? What would you call 2026?
That's a great question. I mean, I think it's more of a enhanced reset,
Okay.
if you will. And I don't use the word reset in a bad way. I think it means more that, um, like I said earlier, the markets are going to kind of push the best operators to the top.
Hmm.
I think you're going to start to see certain groups. maybe coming together in some consolidation. I think you're going to start seeing, folks revamping their assets, their value prop to make sure that they're, reaching the marketplace the way they need to be. So I guess, enhanced reset is kind of I
I
just
like
coined that
that.
right. I just coined that right now. I don't know if that's accurate or not,
No,
but at
put it
least
on the t-shirt, print
yeah,
them.
I
Let's bring
think
them to ADSO, enhanced
E
reset. I like it.
e exactly. So I think that's kind of where we're moving in a positive direction.
That's awesome. That's really, really cool. Yeah, I think that I loved how you said like I think the growth at any cost era is done. The same store growth. We heard it at the beginning, middle of last year. I think they were talking about a lot of Dykema last year. I think at ADSO last year as well. I think that that's like now taking a good foothold, and I think that's where we're headed. So okay, so the model isn't broken. The playbook
No,
is evolving. Let's talk about
exactly.
what's actually making this hard for leaders right now, because I want to give listeners the unvarnished version, right?
Sure.
So let's get specific. From your seat, policy, macro, workforce, what are the two or three forces that are actually making this hard right now? Not the buzzwords, right? The real ones. Like
Yeah.
what are the biggest pressures DSOs are facing right now, and which one is like, let's say, the most underestimated?
I think I think kind of the answer might be, the same answer for both questions. Okay, so I
Mhm.
think uh, a significant maybe two things. So the significant hurdle would be the cost of labor. The
Mhm.
cost of goods, as we know, has all gone up dramatically. I would also say that with the costs going up, the rate of reimbursement rates haven't been going up at the same percentage level as the cost of labor or the
I get that a
costs
lot.
of goods sold, right? So there is margin compression, right? And I think that is um, a real issue. And I think trying to figure out, how can you do more with the same, or what other tools are there to be able to expand access to patients and increase patient acceptance is really a key focus. Um, you know, I still say at the end of the day, 35% to 40% of dental grads today are now going to a DSO. And that's, doubled in the last 7 years. And
Yeah.
so the pipeline for the dentists is there. Still
Okay.
only, one in two people see a dentist per year, so 50%. So there's a ton of dentistry to be done. And I think a lot of it is just making sure that operationally, you're very, very efficient utilizing certain technologies. I know we use the buzzword AI. We can delve into specifics there. But I would say, again, the two biggest factors are the kind of cost of goods, wage pressure, and then reimbursement rates being maintained the same. And really needing to get the dentists and hygienists to where they need to be for where the most patient care is required.
So it sounds like there's not an associate shortage per se. So it sounds like that's good. I think good associates is still tough, as I think most people look at it. Tell me what your take is on the hygiene shortage. Are we finally seeing an easing of that, or is that getting worse?
No. So what we continue to see and what I hear from my members a lot, and again, I will just say to the listeners, this is just kind of what we're seeing. So I'm not really
Yeah.
kind of pontificating or giving an opinion, but more kind of what we see that, the facts are, is that it's with the hygiene pipeline, our understanding, it's more of a toll gate issue. And what I mean by that is that there are plenty of people who want to apply and become hygienists, right? It's a great profession. You go to school for 2 years. It's not a huge outlay of cost, and then you come out and have a great career, great earning potential, and all of that. The issue is that the hygiene programs, again, to my understanding, aren't able to take as many applicants that want to be in there. Now, a couple things, CODA, which accredits programs, the student faculty ratio for hygiene programs, the instructor to student is 5 to 1 versus in dental school, it's 10 to 1. So that's something that
Hmm.
we as an industry need to look at and say, is that palatable? Is that, and it's not one silver bullet's going to fix everything, right? It's also how do you funding for these types of programs, right? And you don't want to increase the cost of what it gets to get in there. But, there's a stable, steady list of hygienists. The one thing we need to be mindful of is that those that are 45 and up is the significant block of hygienists in the workforce population. So we need to be very mindful that those people will start to eventually retire, right?
Hmm.
That's a big cohort. So I think we need to really look at that. And yes, I think at the end of the day, the cost of hygienists and the wages has increased probably about 40% since COVID,
Oh yeah.
and the reimbursement rate hasn't. So I think that's just one thing that is out there, and we need to think about. And how do we continue to increase the pipeline for hygienists, and figuring out how to continue to get patients in to see that and get that care done? Because at the end of the day, too, um, hygienists are, preventative in many respects, right? And that's something that's really important. So, like I said, only 50% of people are going to a dentist, and we need to get more folks in the chair.
On the policy side, what
Yeah.
fights are you actively in right now that the average, let's say, operator probably doesn't see?
Sure. So I would say there are a couple things, right? So what we've seen in the last several years on the policy side is an influx of policymakers from both political parties looking at the role of private capital or investors in the healthcare
Mhm.
space. And this started primarily around health systems where, private capital or other types of investors could come in and directly own those hospitals, right? Now in dentistry, it's different. No one can own a DSO, or a private investor cannot own a dental practice. Maybe one or two states might allow that, but I think, 48 states have corporate practice of dentistry, whereas there's a fine line between clinical, non-clinical, right? So we're not able to come in and, reduce, costs at the practice level per se, or limit access, what we saw with some of these health systems, right? So there was a
Mhm.
lot of news and things about health systems closing, squeezing out, costs and limiting access, right? So dental's a different delivery model. So as a result of that, there have been a lot of these state laws focusing on private equity healthcare transactions, right? And so dental has sometimes gets roped in because the way that healthcare provider is defined in the states, more often than not, dental's included in that. So part of our job has been educating lawmakers to talk about how we're a different delivery model, how the use of capital from the private side doesn't influence clinical side because of the corporate practice of dentistry. And it's actually, if anything, increasing all the things that dentists need to see more patients and to be more efficient. So that's one thing that we've been seeing and kind of tackling. I have seen some states also look at the corporate practice of dentistry type statutes, right? Whether or not, what can DSOs do or not do that are defined that way. So that's something we've been dealing with. I'd also say though, on the positive side, we've been working with many folks in organized dentistry, ADA, the Hygienists Association, looking at licensure portability. So we passed that in 12 states,
Nice.
reciprocity among those states where, a dentist and a hygienist can more freely move. If they're licensed in one state that's in the compact, they can move. Florida, for example, did something called universal licensure, where Florida used to be the hardest state
The
to get
hardest.
licensed in.
Yeah, yeah.
Now they've revamped the process, so it's very, very easy. So you don't need reciprocity. So if you're in New York State looking to come to Florida, it's a much cleaner, much easier, much quicker process. And as we know, as population has shifted post COVID into the Sun Belt, that's, hugely critical, like we were talking about before, to get the workforce where the most patients are.
That's pretty cool. All
Yeah.
right, so those are the pressures, right? Let's flip the coin. I always think the most interesting answer in an environment like this is, you know, eh, is the one to who's building right now. Where's the asymmetric opportunity, right? So, what are the most underrated opportunities, or let's say tailwinds, you see emerging in the next 12 to 24 months?
Yeah, so let me. I'll talk about like on the operator side, and then the kind of
Yeah.
types of things on the tech side that I think are really kind of evolving and moving in a strong way. So I think on the operator side, the specialty side of dentistry is continuing to
Heck
rapidly
yeah.
grow and become even more efficient. Particularly on the oral surgery side of things. Obviously, oral surgeons are at the top of the food chain, if you will, and they're very, very productive, and
They'll
they
tell you the same thing. Don't worry.
yeah. So I think there's a lot of folks in the space and the specialty side that really see the value of a DSO coming in to partner with their operation and being part of a larger enterprise to even reduce, even any operational costs, things like that. But that is giving them the business ability to see even more patients and be even more successful than they were before. So I think we're starting to see more and more of that, and I think that will be a continued growth success story. I know everyone talks about, we talked a little about it before, AI, what does that mean, right? So I think the DSOs working with their supported dentists have done a very good job of implementing AI on the imaging side, right? So
Mhm.
again, the patients are starting to demand it because they're becoming more and more savvy, and it really helps the docs not only for treatment planning, but also the patients are kind of seeing the imaging and saying, oh, okay, well, there's this much loss within the tooth. This is why the dentist is recommending it. And the patients
I do it
are,
today.
are yeah, and they're like, we got to do this today, or we can't, let it slip. And so I think that's really driving more dentistry that needs to be done. I mean, at the end of the day, I always joke, and what I hear from my members is most dentists underdiagnose, including DSO supported dentists. But this is a tool that really gives the patient the driver's seat to better understand. So I think that's one aspect. Then going back to more of just the pure operational side, there's a ton of AI being deployed on revenue cycle management. I was talking to one of my members
Yeah.
that was saying that, before they implemented some artificial intelligence relating to RCM, that they might have been, losing $8 to $10 million a year in just claims that got kicked back that didn't get back submitted and things like that. And the
Yeah.
AI is so much more efficient. So, that's a huge aspect, right? We're also starting to see, I think, optimization on voice AI and scheduling and really thinking through looking at the data and analytics to say, okay, based on your call volume, these are the number of patients and the general type of procedures they're calling for. You may need to have a hygienist move to this location, and or we may need to open up this type of um, treatment option, all those types of things. So I think you're starting
Love
to
that.
see those aspects that are only making it more efficient for both the patient, the supported dentist, and the DSO to really drive that level of care.
Yeah, I absolutely love that, and we're seeing the exact same things with technology and adoption. I still think that we're in the first few innings of that, and
Totally.
it's gonna get even better. It'll be really interesting when people start to adopt, like, a true agentic workflows and have, like, these great orchestration layers, and you have, I don't know, maybe 10, 15, 20 different, agents running around your practice, and then applying it specifically to each one of these practices in a specific way. I think it'll be pretty darn cool. Um so I want to spend the back half of this on what I think is the real story, which is that, like you actually said it, which is that the next era of DSO growth is going to look very different from the last. The last decade was about consolidating fragmented supply. The next decade is going to be about getting more out of what you already own. And I think that creates three big shifts, right? First, clinical excellence becomes a moat. Okay. Technology stops being a line item and becomes an EBITDA engine. And then third, I think patient trust becomes the new competitive ground. I want to take those one at a time, if that's cool with you. So
Yeah.
historically, the DSO model was somewhat agnostic to clinical quality at the group level. I'm sure everybody focused on it, right? But like this, maybe perception's reality, whatever. Clinical work happened practice by practice, but I'm seeing a shift, right? The best operators are treating clinical excellence as a strategy, not as a compliance topic. And I want to know if you're seeing the same thing. Like, are the top DSOs starting to treat clinical excellence as a strategic differentiator? And if so, like, what does that actually look like?
Yeah, yes, and I think many, at least I can speak for ADSO members, they've always been kind of driving and implementing what you just described, right? And I
Hmm.
think it's kind of utilizing, kind of looking at how dentists are treating and where they need support or help, particularly around kind of the continuing education side, right? So I'm going to lean into that where a lot of the DSOs are deploying continuing education for their supported dentists to be trained in the latest technologies, to be trained more on implants where needed, a whole host of things, and the utilization of the tech stack, right? And kind of thinking through that. So I think when they focus on that and continue to focus on it, it's only going to drive the more internal operational efficiencies we talked about. I mean, one of the things that we've been looking at is, data's your driver, right? And when you look at the company Fluent that, processes or reviews, private insurance claims, on a whole, as an aggregate, DSO supported dentists are delivering better treatment outcomes and less retreatment than many solo practices. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that they have the continuing education, that they have the business support so they can focus just on the clinical side, and that they don't have to, and they have all the tools on the tech stack. So I think when you start seeing that, and that's something that they know they need to have, and the patients are demanding it. It goes back to that imaging piece of the AI. The
Mhm.
patients want to know, is this needed? Is this not needed? Is it nice to have? But it's something that they're in the driver's seat on.
Do you think with that, do you think that there's a measurement gap? Meaning the industry doesn't have great shared metrics for
Yeah.
clinical quality at scale?
Yes, yes. I think that's something I've been hearing for the 5 years I've been at ADSO, is that there is no kind of consensus on what quote quality of care is. And I know, there's been some talk with even the payers about, quality improvement type data and what does that mean
Mhm.
and how does that get defined. I think that is a key component, right? Now, I think some DSOs are able to kind of work with the payers particularly and say, hey, we're more efficient. We're able to provide this level of quality through our supported dentists that
Yeah.
is going to be, more preventative in the longer term, or, other things that are in the better health of the patient that's going to, help the patient, help drive down costs on all sides. So yeah, I think that's a key component.
Okay, cool. All right, technology, right? Every DSO has been told for a decade that tech is the answer. Most
Right.
of them are probably exhausted by it. I get it. There's a graveyard of like these half implementations out there, but I think something has structurally changed in the last 24 months. So let me put a math problem on the table for you, right? If a DSO can pull 2 to 400 basis points of EBITDA out of administrative costs through, like, let's say, automation, smarter scheduling, RCM lift, AI on the front desk, fewer denials, right? All those that fundamentally changes what a practice is worth, right? So it changes how attractive ownership is. It changes deal math. It changes what a private equity sponsor will pay, right?
Right.
So is technology starting to show up as a real EBITDA lever, and is that changing how deals are getting done?
I think so. Yes. I mean, when you talk to a lot of the investors of, what they're expecting, they need to understand how a DSO differentiates itself from others, right?
Okay.
And one of those certainly is the technology side of things, right? So it's about, how are you increasing those EBITDA margins? And I think, when you look at case acceptance, when there's a deployment of AI imaging technology, case acceptance is increased. I know a lot of folks are looking at salivary testing, and
Hmm.
that's also increasing patient acceptance because the patients are seeing in real time the level of bacteria in their mouth, and they believe, okay, wow, I need to get this done, which they do. So I think you're seeing that, and then again on the back office side of things, the optimization of scheduling. Like when people are calling, how to get them in. There has been a huge miss of like how do you get people in following up, and then of course, the very important side of how do you get paid and the RCM piece of that. And so I think if you're able to manage those things, that's hugely important. Yes, I think too they're starting to look at the workforce side of things.
Yeah.
How are you managing costs on the labor side? But yes, I think anything that can increase those EBITDA margins, that's obviously not sacrificing clinical side, is a major driver. I mean, I think it's also, we may see in the next, 12, 24 months consolidation of some of these DSOs that are in the, 50 office to 150 locations. And unlike other industries, there's still what I say a ton of white space, right? So if you took like the three largest DSOs out there right now, I think they would only account for about 6% of the overall
Hmm.
oral healthcare
That's what I
marketplace.
heard.
So there's a huge amount of opportunity to bring platforms together to create even more efficiencies and more synergies, that will drive those margins.
Nice. So what would you say the gap is between the operators who get tech right and the ones who burn cash on it?
I mean, I think at the end of the day, it's just a major difference. One's more efficient and delivering, like they have a better mousetrap. and they're able to move on it, right? And I think those that don't or are too separated at the operational level aren't going to be able to get the job done, right? And I do think at the end of the day, like DSO's culture is very, very important, right? So it's making sure that the
Yep.
doctors, it's a people business at the end of the day, right? So it's that making sure that the doctors understand, um, you know, all the things that are available to them. How are they buying into the technology? And a lot of the times they are very, very early adapters on this, right? They want to use it, they want to get it. So I think it's a lot about too the DSO working with the doctors to make sure that they know that they have all of these types of technologies available to them, training them through the continuing education, other aspects, and making sure that they're comfortable with it and understand that it is an enhancement tool for them. And again, that the patient will want to see it. I think at this day and age, a lot of people won't even probably go to a provider if they don't have the ability to make an appointment online or via their
Yeah.
phone or payment, online. No one wants to pick up the phone and call. They just want to be able to like
No.
do it. So whatever's easiest for the patient too is really, really good. And then obviously the dentist, having all the technology to be able to be a better clinician and treat more that's been underdiagnosed is a huge key component of that. And I think we're seeing the investors demand that.
So if a mid-sized DSO has one technology decision to get right in the next 12 months, what do you think that is?
It's tough because I think I think it's easy to say, oh, the imaging piece is huge, right? I think that
Sure.
that's huge because you're going to see, more people accepting treatment because they fully understand that the treatment is absolutely necessary.
Yep.
So I think that that's probably where the biggest aspect. It's not a matter of, oh, it's nice to have. It's a matter of you have to have it. But then of course, the RCM side I think is absolutely key
Yeah.
as well.
Get reimbursed, right? Yeah, I completely agree. Yeah, I agree on the it's almost like the really smart people were already to imaging. It's almost like they made that decision a year ago.
Right.
I think that the tails coming in, I do think it's gonna be standard of care, right, at
Yeah.
some point in time.
Yeah. Great point. Yeah.
But at the same time, it's interesting. Dentistry is kind of leading that on the imaging side of things. You're not seeing, I'm sure AI is a big deal in the hospital side of things as well, but you're not hearing about it as much. But boy, on the dental side, you just hear it
Yeah,
nonstop.
it's interesting you say that. I was with some folks who are on the radiology side of things, and they were saying that they don't believe AI imaging is quite there yet for
Yeah.
for their for their specialty on the medical side there.
Hmm.
I think it makes sense, but I think when you're looking at the X-rays and the imaging of the teeth and can kind of extrapolate, it might be. And again, I'm not a clinician, but it seems
Maybe
like
it's
if
more
there's
simple.
maybe I
Yeah,
don't know. Yeah, maybe I don't know on that, but it definitely seems to be something that is helping the dentist be a better clinician, and it's also giving the
sure.
patient the opportunity to understand what type of treatment's needed.
Completely agree. So, all right. So, last big theme, patient affordability is real.
Mm, yeah, yeah,
Insurance benefits, you said it, haven't kept up pace with cost. The annual max in most plans is the same number it was 25 years ago, which is just ridiculous. Case acceptance hasn't moved much industry wide. Literally, I think our Catalyst report last year was 54%. This year, it's 54%, letting the cat out of the bag.
yeah,
So it hasn't gotten any better. Trust in healthcare in general is at a generational low. And yet patients are walking into DSO offices every single day choosing to spend money on dentistry, right? So what's the path forward on patient trust and affordability? And what role do DSOs play here
yeah,
that an independent practice possibly struggles with, can't, who knows?
yeah. I think it's absolutely critical. I mean, putting on my old political hat, I mean, affordability is probably the top issue for most households, and we're seeing folks, costs of goods, inflation continue to go up. Gasoline prices are high right now. They're not going to
Mhm.
come down anytime soon, even when some geopolitical things end. So the discretionary the discretionary
Have to.
funding
Yeah.
is noticeable, right? And I think
Yeah.
it's hard for people to understand that they're paying into insurance. We do know dental insurance is more like a coupon than actual
Benefit.
insurance. Yeah,
Yeah.
and I think they look at it and say, okay, I'm in pain, I'm coming in, maybe I need a root canal, and them being surprised that they might have to pay $1,500 at a minimum out of pocket and that the insurance not's covering it, but you're in pain, you need to get out. So I think one of the key things that we have been working with, our DSOs have been working with, is patient financing. And I know that some folks are always concerned about, the financing angle, making sure that there are disclosures, which of course there are.
You gotta
But
do
I
it.
think it really is something that, working with many of the patient financing companies is hugely important because it allows patients to receive the care that they need immediately while having, affordable payments over a certain period of time, and that's really impactful. And I think DSOs being able to partner with those third-party patient financing platforms is very, very key. And I come back to saying it. It's all about cost, care, and convenience, right? So I think it's something that people want to come in, they want to be able to get it done, understand that it's not going to break the bank for them, and that's going to be a continued driver. It's a big, big piece of this until dental insurance can get fully changed, and I don't know when. I will say what's interesting is that coming out of COVID, there were a ton of people on Medicare Advantage that had very plentiful dental
Hmm.
benefits, and a lot
Yeah.
of people were signed up for that. And they were very, very plentiful. And I think the plans didn't realize how much usage would be there, which is good because people are getting a lot of dental work. But what we've seen a little is that some of the payers want to keep the benefits for their members, which makes perfect sense, but also are trying to figure out not paying as much maybe to the provider. So again, it's more of making sure that there are options for the patient to receive the care they want. And more often than not, most DSOs carry a plethora more of insurance than say other types of traditional practice models. So there's a lot of affordability options there in that component that DSOs offer.
So we have a saying at Henderson One: trust plus affordability equals patient acceptance, right? Which I
Yes.
think is
Yes.
it sounds so simple at the end of the day, but it's so I think it's becoming more it's becoming easier to do because of these AI platforms and third party financing and just making it more transparent. And also, I think a lot of people don't go upstream enough because to get the correct patient financing, you have to get the right eligibility information, right? You have to get the right usage information. And if you're not getting that information at hand, written back into your PMS in a specific manner, you can't even do the math. You can guess at the math, but maybe you
Right.
finance too much, maybe you didn't finance enough. Like who knows? Then you've got those refund, hanging credit, problems or whatever it might be. So I think it's interesting. So one quick question on this topic
Yeah.
is there a connection, do you think, between operational efficiency and patient affordability that the industry doesn't talk about enough?
Yes, I think that's a huge issue. I think a lot of the members that we work with are talking about it, right? That
Okay.
they're seeing, you know, at times some of that maybe discretionary spend not being spent as much, and that there's a need to fill the void where there's an affordability issue. But I think
Mhm.
the industry as a whole needs to be talking about that, right? And I think they need to figure out, how can we provide great clinical care at an affordable cost, and what are the mechanisms to make that happen?
So, Andrew, before I let you go,
Yeah,
two final questions. Okay. I want listeners to leave with something they can act on tomorrow morning.
sure.
First, where is the DSO industry going to be? This is interesting. Get out your crystal ball. I'm sure it's somewhere over there. Where's the DSO industry going to be in 2030? Not what's hopeful, what's likely.
Yeah. So a couple other interesting data. I mentioned, Fluent, the third party, claims data analytical firm. Their data showcases that 51% of patients now visit a DSO supported dentist. So we're kind of over that 50% hurdle. I would say at the very minimum, that number will probably be in the high 50s, low 60s by 2030. I would say that. I would say the number of dentists going into DSOs is going to go probably from that 35 to 40% close to 50%. I think that's probably, it could be over 50% in the next 4 years. I could see that, definitely. But I think as a segment, again, how people self-select, categorize themselves as a DSO supported dentist or, whatever, but anybody that's working with a centralized back office platform, I think they're saying anywhere it's like, 27 to 30%. I bet you that number will be north of 35% or so of overall docs in there. So I think you're going to see also, like I mentioned, probably more groups coming together to create more efficiencies, create better platforms, and really kind of driving that patient experience and great quality of care.
It's awesome. All right. Final question.
Yeah,
What's the one thing you wish more operators understood about the policy fights you are in on their behalf?
great question. I think at the end of the day, it's twofold. One, the work that ADSO and its members are doing on the public policy side is ensuring that the DSO model is continuing to exist, continuing to grow. So it's really mitigating any risks or any onerous aspects to the regulatory environment in which the DSO model is operating, right? So our strategic plan is, protect, position, and promote the DSO model. They're kind of the three P's, right? So I would also say the other aspects we're looking at is, how do we really drive meaningful revenue growth as well? So there's the licensure portability issue, there's insurance reform. I think also, like we were talking about, we need to look at how perhaps dental assistants or other folks in that space might be able to take on expanded function work, right? I think that's another thing that we just need to think about while we're continuing to develop the workforce that we need. And so, end of the day, it's about mitigating the downside risks of potentially what's out there so that its ability to operate. And then it's also how do we enable a great environment to drive revenue growth.
That's awesome. Andrew Smith, President CEO of the ADSO, thank you for being honest, man. This is awesome. And thanks for
Great.
being direct. Like, thanks for doing the work that, really gives the rest of us the cover to build, which is pretty darn cool. So,
Thank you.
time for a quick plug. Where can listeners find you and
Yeah.
talk to us about the ADSO coming up?
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, no, no, no. I,
Yeah.
I I appreciate, the partnership with Henry Schein, and Henry Schein One has been great and continue to do that. You guys do a ton for the industry and support ADSO. So, I think if people want to know more about ADSO, I would really encourage, everybody who's a DSO needs to be part of ADSO, right? Because it's not just about supporting the industry's growth. Yes, we're going to do this, but it's important to be part of the network, part of peer-to-peer networking. We do a ton of programming for folks that are looking at best practices and connecting with the various different types of industry partners like Shine and others so people know what's out there, right? And we do that type of programming. So we have our annual event this year. It's our 15th summit, and it's really focused on not just the CEOs of DSOs, but also their management teams. So historically, ADSO started with, kind of the beginning founders of the DSOs and really working together collaboratively to grow the industry. And so now it's really about how do the C-suite teams also work together to collaboratively grow. It speaks to the entire conversation we had. So at the summit this year, I think you're going to see a couple things. One, obviously we love to have, big picture ideas about where things are going, but we're going to be looking at, what is value creation in today's DSO marketplace or the dental industry, right? So again, what we talked about here today, a lot of that, but also about how do you really build high performing teams for that future of value creation, and what do those teams need to be able to do to drive that level of excellence. So I think you're going to be hearing a lot about that. There's going to be quite a bit on AI, not just talk about why AI is great, but like how do I actually, if I want to implement the imaging, how do I go about doing that, right? And how do I
Nice.
scale it? How do I commercialize it? How do I look at, the RCM side? How do I look at voice automation? All of that. And then we also have quite a bit of breakout sessions that are very tactical. So they're broken out by functional areas, based on the C-suite's, position, and really, really great. That's kind of where the rubber hits the road. So really in-depth aspects to kind of figure out solutions and needs. And then of course, there's just all the networking going on and hearing from all the various different types of players. And I will say the type of programming we put on at the summit we do throughout the year for our members. So we host study clubs, we host kind of CEO straight talks. We're just talking about, various, do's and don'ts and, best practices, all that stuff. And then we have a number of other events coming up. We've got an event specifically geared towards those that are in that kind of 15 to 50 office, our next level event. We have a meeting, an investor meeting that we bring together all the vendors, all the DSOs, and all the kind of PE funds and others that are looking to invest. And then this past year, we just launched a technology expo where we brought together a lot of the emerging tech and talking a lot about that. So it's kind of a deep dive into the tech side. So we're doing a lot on all facets of the industry. And, anybody who's interested in participating, just feel free to shoot me an email, asmith@theadso.org, or go to our website, www.adso.org. So we're here.
I love how it's the ADSO.org.
I know, I
Like
did not.
the Ohio State. Like, I
Ohio
love it.
State. I know. I should just introduce myself as Andrew Smith from the ADSO.
I absolutely, you should. Very
Yeah.
cool. All right. For anyone listening, this is the exact type of conversation that I just don't think happens enough. The operators and the policy people need to be in the same room more often. And that's the whole point of this show. And with that, I'm Dr. Ryan Hungate. This was Spilling the Teeth, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks.
Thanks.